There are mysteries in this world that resist all explanation. From unexplained cave carvings and enigmatic mounds to artifacts buried deep in the soil with no clear origin, Oklahoma holds secrets that defy conventional archaeology. Could these remnants point to lost knowledge, evidence of civilizations more advanced than we imagine, or connections to a wider ancient world that history has forgotten? Before we dive in, here's a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to enjoy the stories. They help bring the journey to life, but you can just as easily follow along through the audio. Feel free to let this play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these perplexing mysteries. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider subscribing. Now, let's begin our journey into the unsolved ancient mysteries of Oklahoma. But not all ancient mysteries are built from towering stone. Some are hidden deep within the earth, sealed away in darkness, waiting for centuries to be found. In the rolling green hills of eastern Oklahoma, near the modern town of Spiro, lies a site that was once the beating heart of a powerful and sophisticated chiefdom. This is the Spiro Mounds, and at its core lies a mystery so profound it has come to be known as the Oklahoma equivalent of King Tut's tomb. This is the mystery of the Great Mortuary, a sacred chamber filled with unimaginable treasures, ritually sealed and abandoned, leaving behind a question that echoes through the ages. Why would a civilization at the peak of its power willingly bury its most sacred possessions and simply walk away? For over 500 years, from roughly 800 to 1450 AD, the Spiro site was a dominant cultural and religious hub for the entire Mississippian world. Think of it as an ancient North American capital, a place where powerful leaders, priests, and artisans gathered. It was a center of trade, with goods flowing in from the Great Lakes, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Atlantic seaboard. But Spiro's true power wasn't just material, it was spiritual. It was here that leaders forged connections with the spirit world, and it was here they created objects of breathtaking beauty and profound sacred meaning. The heart of this spiritual power was a hollowed-out natural cave, or a chamber carved into a large mound, known today as the Craig Mound. Within this chamber, now called the Great Mortuary, the Spiro people placed their most elite dead alongside a treasure trove that defies belief. We are not talking about simple pots or tools. We are talking about a masterwork of ancient American art. There were intricately carved conch shell cups, brought all the way from the Gulf, depicting supernatural beings and intricate rituals. There were effigy pipes of stone, carved into the forms of eagles, frogs, and wise old men. There were blankets and robes adorned with thousands of shell beads, copper plates from the Great Lakes region embossed with sacred designs, and beautifully crafted weapons. This was not merely a grave. It was a library of spiritual knowledge, a collection of the most powerful objects the culture possessed. Then, around the year 1400 AD, something monumental happened. The people of Spiro did something almost unthinkable. They performed a final grand ceremony. They carefully arranged their most sacred leaders and priests within the chamber, surrounded by this unparalleled collection of wealth and power. And then, they sealed it. They brought in basketload after basketload of earth, methodically and deliberately burying the entire chamber, entombing their treasures for all time. Shortly after this act, the site was abandoned. The powerful chiefdom that had ruled the region for centuries simply vanished, its people scattering, leaving the sealed mound as a silent, earthen monument. So why? Why seal away your history, your art, your connection to the gods? The answer is lost to time, but archaeologists and historians have pieced together several compelling theories. The most widely accepted theory points to a widespread societal collapse that swept across the Mississippian world around this time. A great drought, lasting for decades, could have devastated the corn-based agriculture that was the foundation of their society. Famine and disease would have followed. In the face of such a catastrophe, the power of the priests and chiefs may have crumbled. The act of sealing the mortuary could have been a final, desperate ritual, a way to protect the sacred soul of their culture from the chaos unfolding around them. A hope that one day, when the world was right again, these powers could be awakened. Another theory suggests internal revolt. Perhaps the common people, suffering under the strain of feeding the elite, rose up and overthrew the ruling class. The sealing of the chamber could have been an act of defiance, a literal burying of the old religious order. Or, conversely, it could have been a final act of reverence by the remaining believers, protecting their gods from desecration at the hands of unbelievers. There is also the possibility of a more spiritual reason. Perhaps a new religious movement swept through the region, declaring the old ways and their associated objects to be dangerous or taboo. The treasures weren't abandoned, they were contained, their powerful spirits locked safely away in the earth so the people could move on to a new belief system. The true reason may never be known. The mystery was tragically compounded in the 1930s, when commercial looters, known as the Pecola Mining Company, tunneled into the mound and ransacked the chamber, destroying countless context clues that might have held the answer. What remains, however, is a haunting question. The great mortuary at Spiro Mounds stands as a testament to a culture that chose to preserve its soul rather than see it fade away. They left behind not a ruin, but a time capsule, a sacred puzzle sealed in Oklahoma clay, challenging us to wonder what could drive a people to bury their greatest treasures and vanish into history. From a sealed chamber deep within a mound, we now turn to a message carved into the face of a stone, sitting out in the open air for anyone to find. A message that, if true, rewrites the history of an entire continent. Nestled within the rugged, beautiful terrain of the Ouachita Mountains in southeastern Oklahoma is a large slab of sandstone, measuring over 12 feet high and 10 feet wide. And on this stone are 8 clear, unmistakable characters. To the modern eye, they look strikingly like ancient letters from a faraway land. This is the Heavener Runestone, and its simple inscription has sparked a debate that has raged for over a century. Is this proof that Viking explorers trekked deep into the American heartland hundreds of years before Columbus ever set sail? The inscription on the stone appears to be a runic message, using characters from an ancient Germanic alphabet. The most common interpretation of the 8 letters is GNOMEDAL. This could be broken down into 2 words, GNOME and DAL. In Old Norse, Gnome could be a personal name, perhaps a chieftain or an explorer, and Dal translates to valley. So the message would simply read, Gnome's Valley. A territorial marker, a claim, a simple message stating that a man named Gnome was here, and this land was his. A seemingly mundane statement that is, in fact, utterly revolutionary. The problem, of course, is the timeline. According to conventional history, the first European contact with the Americas was led by Norse explorers like Leif Erikson around 1000 AD. They established a small, short-lived settlement in Newfoundland, Canada, known as Vinland. But that's over 2,000 miles to the northeast of Oklahoma. The idea that a Viking party would, or even could, travel all the way from the coast of Canada, down the Mississippi River system, and into the mountainous interior of what is now Oklahoma seems, to many, fantastically improbable. It would represent one of the most incredible journeys of exploration in human history, one that was completely lost to the historical record. Naturally, such a bold claim has been met with intense skepticism. Scholars have put forward alternative explanations. One suggests the inscription is not a runic claim at all, but a much more recent boundary marker made by a 19th century Scandinavian settler, perhaps even a hoax. Another theory posits that the letters are not Norse runes, but characters from a different alphabet altogether, maybe a form of Celtic Ogham, or even a coincidental arrangement of natural fractures and Native American petroglyphs. But the mystery deepens. The type of runes used on the Heavener stone are identified as Elder Futhark, an alphabet that was largely replaced by a younger version by the year 800 AD. If the stone is genuine, it wouldn't just predate Columbus. It would predate the main Viking age, suggesting exploration as early as the 600s or 700s AD. Furthermore, other, smaller suspected runestones have been found in the immediate area, like the Puebloan Trade stones, hinting that perhaps this wasn't a single lost traveler, but a group, maybe even a failed expedition. Proponents of the stone's authenticity ask a simple question: why would a 19th century Swedish or Norwegian farmer, carving a simple property marker, use an ancient, obsolete runic alphabet that had been out of use for 1,000 years? It would be like a modern American settler carving a message in flawless Elizabethan English to mark his cornfield. It doesn't quite add up. The Heavener runestone exists in this frustrating space between possibility and improbability. It is a tangible, physical object with a clear inscription that refuses to give up its secrets easily. It represents the romantic possibility of lost explorers, of intrepid Norsemen venturing into unknown continents far earlier than anyone believed possible. It taps into that deep human desire to discover evidence of forgotten chapters in our history. Was it a lone traveler, far from home, carving his name into the wilderness to prove he existed? Was it a hoax that has managed to fool people for generations? Or is it genuine, a silent stone sentinel that has stood for over 1,000 years, guarding the secret of the first Europeans to lay eyes on the Oklahoma hills? The stone isn't talking. It simply sits, weathered by time, its cryptic message waiting for the day someone can finally provide the definitive answer. History is filled with the rise and fall of mighty empires, but often, the most haunting disappearances are not those that end in a fiery collapse, but those that simply fade away. While the Spiro sealed their world beneath the earth in a single, dramatic act, another great culture in Oklahoma experienced a far slower and far more puzzling vanishing act. This is the story of the Caddo Nation, a people of profound sophistication and deep spiritual connection to the land, who built a network of thriving communities across the southeastern part of the state. Their mounds still dot the landscape, silent reminders of a complex society that, centuries before any European ever set foot on this continent, began to recede like a slow tide, leaving behind a mystery as quiet and deep as the forests they once called home. The Caddo were not newcomers. Their cultural roots stretch back over 1,000 years. By the time they were at their peak, around 800 to 1400 AD, they were the premier mound builders of the region. Their towns were centers of ceremony, trade, and governance. They constructed large, circular grass houses that could hold entire extended families, and their priests and leaders directed the building of great earthen mounds, platforms for important buildings and burial sites for the elite. They were master potters, creating beautiful, sophisticated vessels often engraved with intricate designs. They were also skilled farmers, cultivating vast fields of corn, beans, and squash along the rich river valleys of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. Their society was complex, hierarchical, and deeply stable, seemingly built to last for millennia. Then, beginning around the 14th century, something began to change. The evidence isn't a layer of ash or a sacked village. It's a gradual but unmistakable retreat. Archaeologists see the signs in the ground. The large, central villages, once buzzing with activity, show less and less evidence of permanent occupation. The creation of their distinctive fineware pottery slows and then stops. The practice of building new burial mounds ceases. It's as if the vibrant cultural heart of the Caddo began to beat slower and slower. By the time Spanish and French explorers like Hernando de Soto and La Salle journeyed through the region in the 16th and 17th centuries, they encountered Caddo people, but they described a world already diminished from its former glory. The great centers of power were gone. Within another century or two, the Caddo had largely withdrawn from Oklahoma entirely, their presence fading into history and memory. The question is, why did a successful, established civilization simply choose to leave? Unlike a sudden catastrophe, the Caddo's disappearance invites theories about a slow-burning crisis. One of the most compelling suspects is climate change. Tree ring data from the period suggests the American Southwest and Southern Plains experienced a series of prolonged, severe droughts. For a culture deeply dependent on agriculture, a decade of poor rains could cause hardship. A century of unpredictable weather could unravel the very fabric of society. Failed crops would lead to famine, malnutrition, and social unrest. The powerful priestly class, who guaranteed good harvests through ritual, would see their influence wane. People might have abandoned the large, difficult-to-sustain towns and splintered into smaller, more mobile family groups to survive. Another possibility is the arrival of Old World diseases. While we typically think of European plagues arriving with colonists, it's possible that pathogens spread inland from early Spanish expeditions in the 1500s far faster than the explorers themselves. Diseases like smallpox or measles, for which Native Americans had no immunity, could have swept through the Caddo homelands like a silent wildfire, devastating populations and collapsing their social structure decades before any European ever made contact with them directly. There are also social theories. Perhaps the Caddo were pressured by the migration of other tribes into their territory, such as the arrival of Osage and Ouachita peoples from the east and north. This could have led to increased conflict over resources, making their large villages vulnerable targets. Or perhaps the very structure of their society became too rigid, too demanding. The effort of building mounds and sustaining a large elite class may have finally become too great a burden for the common people, leading to a quiet revolution, a deliberate shift away from complexity toward a simpler, more egalitarian way of life. The truth is, we may never know the exact combination of factors. The Caddo did not vanish. Their descendants are a vibrant, federally recognized nation today, but they left their homeland. The story of the Oklahoma Caddo is not one of extinction, but of exodus. Their silent mounds are not tombs, but rather unanswered questions. They stand as a testament to a graceful and tragic decline, a reminder that even without invasion or cataclysm, a culture can be gently, inexorably, persuaded to leave its world behind. Just as one mysterious stone inscription can be dismissed as an anomaly, a coincidence of weathering or a modern prank, a second, similar discovery forces us to stop and truly reconsider. The Heavener runestone poses a thrilling historical puzzle all on its own. But what if it wasn't alone? What if there was another message, carved in a similar hand, waiting in the hills just a few miles away? This is the story of the Pattison Runestone, a lesser-known but equally intriguing counterpart to Heavener. Its existence amplifies the mystery, transforming a solitary enigma into a potential pattern and forcing us to ask, if one Viking was lost in these woods, could there have been more? The Pattison Runestone was discovered in 1967, roughly 7 miles as the crow flies from the more famous Heavener stone. Like its counterpart, it is a sandstone slab, though smaller in size. And on its surface, another set of carved characters can be seen. The inscription is different, shorter, and some would argue more ambiguous. Where the Heavener inscription is clear and deeply carved, the Pattison runes are shallower and more weathered, making them harder to decipher with certainty. Some researchers have interpreted the 7 characters as a word, perhaps a name like Lider or Lidar. Others see it as a combination of runes that might not form a known word at all, but could be a symbol, a marker, or an attempt at writing that was never finished. The immediate question, of course, is whether this second stone validates the first. For proponents of the Norse theory, the answer is a resounding yes. One strange stone in the wilderness could be a freak occurrence. But 2, found in such close proximity, this no longer feels like a coincidence. It suggests deliberation. It suggests exploration. The 2 stones could be territorial boundary markers defining the edges of a claimed area. They could be navigational aids, pointing the way to a camp or a source of water. Or, in a more haunting scenario, they could be grave markers, signaling the final resting places of explorers who never made it home. The presence of a second stone gives the Heavener story a new layer of depth and possibility. Yet the Pattison stone also amplifies the skepticism. Its more faded and less precise nature makes it an easier target for doubt. Critics argue that if the Heavener stone is a 19th century hoax, the Pattison stone could easily be a copycat effort by another local, perhaps inspired by the legends growing around the first discovery. The timing of its finding in the 1960s, during a period of renewed public interest in the Heavener site, is often cited as suspicious. Without the clear, crisp presentation of the Heavener runes, the Pattison stone remains deep in a shadow of uncertainty. There is a third, more nuanced possibility. Perhaps the Pattison stone is genuine, but not Norse. Some researchers have suggested the characters might bear a resemblance to other ancient alphabets, or could even be a form of cryptic hunting mark or territory symbol used by 19th century pioneers that just happens to look unintentionally like runes. This theory places it in a strange middle ground, not a Viking relic, but not a deliberate fake either, merely a coincidence of history that has fueled modern speculation. The power of the Pattison Runestone lies not in providing answers, but in deepening the mystery. It is the second chapter in a story that may never have a third. It asks us to look at the quiet, wooded hills of the Ouachitas not as a backdrop, but as a potential stage for a lost historical drama. Were these hills once walked by Norsemen, far from their icy fjords, carving their names into the warm Oklahoma sandstone? Or do these stones represent a different kind of human mystery, the enduring desire to leave a mark, to say, "I was here," whether 1,000 years ago or just a century past? Together, the Heavener and Pattison stones stand as silent partners in an unsolved mystery, two pieces of a puzzle that, so far, no one has been able to completely fit together. High atop a rugged outcrop in the Ozark foothills, overlooking the modern city of Tulsa, lies a canvas of stone that has silently witnessed the passage of centuries. This is Turkey Mountain, and its surface is not blank. It is a dense, overlapping tapestry of ancient carvings, a chaotic and beautiful gallery of rock art known as petroglyphs. But unlike a simple drawing or a single symbol, the collection at Turkey Mountain presents a far more complex puzzle. It's not a single message, but a palimpsest, a manuscript where layer upon layer of history has been inscribed, one over the other, by different hands across vast stretches of time. Unraveling this enigma isn't about finding one answer, but about listening to the echoes of many voices, all asking the same question: what were they trying to tell us? The images themselves are striking and diverse. Etched into the sandstone are spirals that seem to pull the eye into their vortex. There are humanoid figures with strange, exaggerated features, their arms raised as if in prayer or celebration. There are paw prints of animals like panthers and birds in flight, perfectly captured in stone. There are abstract patterns, circles within circles, zigzag lines, and grids that look like primitive maps or game boards. But the true mystery lies in the relationships between these carvings. Some are deeply weathered, their edges softened by 1,000 rains, indicating immense age. Others appear sharper, newer, carved right on top of or beside the older ones. This is not a planned composition. It is a conversation across generations. So what does it all mean? Archaeologists and researchers have proposed several theories, each adding a layer to the mystery. One compelling idea is that the site was an astronomical observatory. The spirals and concentric circles could represent the sun, the moon, or celestial events. Certain carvings might align with solstice sunrises or the movements of important stars, turning the entire outcrop into a crude but effective calendar for tracking the seasons, essential for planting and harvesting. Another theory points to spiritual significance. Turkey Mountain, with its sweeping views of the Arkansas River Valley, feels like a sacred space. The petroglyphs could be a record of visions quests. Shamans or individuals seeking guidance might have come here to fast and pray, and the symbols they carved are representations of the spirits or animals they encountered in their trance states. The human figures with their arms raised could be depictions of these shamans, forever captured in a moment of connection with the spirit world. The site may have been a place where the veil between worlds was considered thin. There is also the possibility of a practical purpose. The carvings could serve as territorial markers for different tribes, a sort of ancient no trespassing sign or a claim to hunting grounds. The animal tracks might indicate good hunting in the area, or they could be part of a storytelling tradition, recording a legendary hunt or a creation myth for the people who lived there. The grids might indeed be game boards for ancient pastimes, a place of community and leisure. The most fascinating and frustrating aspect of Turkey Mountain is that all these theories could be true simultaneously. A spiral carved by a shaman 1,000 years ago to represent a vision could have been seen 500 years later by a farmer who added his own marks to ensure a good harvest. A century after that, a hunter might have etched a successful kill next to them all. The site isn't a single page of history, it's an entire, jumbled book. The layers themselves are the story, a story of continuous, sacred use over millennia by different cultures, each adding their own chapter without ever erasing the one that came before. The enigma of Turkey Mountain isn't just in interpreting the symbols, but in understanding the profound human need to leave a mark, to say to the future, "I was here, this is what I saw, this is what I believed." From a sacred hill covered in ancient messages, we journey to a quiet field where the earth itself holds a story of a task left incomplete. In the lush prairies of what is now Oklahoma, the Mississippian culture left behind hundreds of mounds, earthen pyramids that served as platforms for temples, homes for chiefs, and burial sites for the elite. Most of these mounds are finished monuments, their slopes smooth and their summits flat. But at the Reed archaeological site, the story is different. Here, the mounds seem frozen in a state of becoming. The construction halted, the baskets of earth dropped, the project abandoned. This site offers a rare and haunting snapshot of a moment in time, a pause button pressed on a grand construction project, leaving behind a pressing question: what happened to make them stop? The Reed site was a significant ceremonial center, a place of importance for the people who lived there. Archaeologists have found the remains of a large village with evidence of houses, storage pits, and workshops, and at its heart, they began to build their mounds. The evidence of their work is still clearly visible in the soil. You can see the layers of different colored earth, the basket loads of dirt that were carried and deposited with intention. The mounds were rising, taking shape, on their way to becoming the impressive structures found at places like Spiro. But then, it all stopped. The site shows no evidence of a violent end. There are no layers of ash from a catastrophic fire, no scattered skeletons suggesting an attack or a massacre. Instead, the abandonment appears to have been swift, deliberate, and strangely orderly. It's as if one day, everyone simply put down their tools and walked away, leaving their half-finished monuments to the wind and the rain. This kind of evidence is incredibly rare and incredibly valuable, as it captures a society not at its end, but in a moment of profound decision. So what could cause an entire community to abandon its sacred heart? Theories once again point to environmental pressures. A prolonged drought, as suggested for the Caddo, would have made the backbreaking labor of mound building impossible to sustain. The priority would shift from glorifying gods and chiefs to simple, desperate survival. The energy required to feed the workers moving thousands of tons of earth would no longer be available if the crops were failing. The mounds would become not a symbol of power, but a symbol of waste. Another possibility is a sudden shift in political or spiritual power. Perhaps the chief or high priest who ordered the construction died suddenly, and his successor lacked the authority or the vision to continue the project. Or perhaps an omen was read, a comet in the sky, a sudden eclipse that was interpreted as a divine command to cease construction immediately. The site itself might have been deemed cursed or unlucky, forcing the people to abandon it to avoid further misfortune. There is also the possibility of a slow social unraveling. The construction of mounds required a centralized authority and a compliant population. If the people grew tired of the labor, if they began to question the power of the elites demanding such an effort, it could have led to internal dissent or even a quiet revolution. The walking away from the mounds wouldn't be a flight from danger, but a rejection of the system that built them. The unfinished mounds at Reed are a powerful, silent mystery. They are not ruins, they are a work in progress, forever paused. They stand as a testament to the best-laid plans of a sophisticated culture, and a reminder that those plans are always at the mercy of the world around them. They challenge us to look at a landscape not for what is there, but for what is missing. They ask us to imagine the basket-laden workers, the chanting priests, the busy community, and then to imagine the silence that followed, leaving only the Oklahoma wind to whisper across the half-built earth. In the stark, windswept landscape of the Oklahoma Panhandle, a place of open skis and sweeping plains, archaeologists have made discoveries that seem to belong to another world entirely. Here, far from any desert mesa or towering cliff dwelling, they have unearthed distinctive black and white painted pottery, turquoise beads, and tools made of obsidian, all hallmarks of the ancestral Puebloans, the famous cliff dwellers of the American Southwest. These artifacts, found in the ruins of Panhandle villages, are hundreds of miles from their place of origin. They are silent, broken pieces that tell a story of a connection that should not have been possible, pointing to a vast, forgotten network of trade and contact that stretched across the ancient world. How did these treasures from the deserts of New Mexico and Arizona find their way into the heart of the southern plains? The people living in the Oklahoma Panhandle between 1200 and 1500 AD were not Puebloans themselves. They were plains villagers, ancestors of groups like the Ouachitas and Pawnee, who lived in settled communities of earth lodges and farmed along the river bottoms. Their world was one of bison, grass, and sun. The world of the ancestral Puebloans, centered in the Four Corners region, was one of sandstone, canyonlands, and complex multi-storied towns built into cliff faces. These were two vastly different cultures, separated by the vast and imposing Llano Estacado, the staked plains, a formidable and daunting landscape to cross. Yet the evidence is undeniable. These two worlds were connected. The most prominent theory is one of long-distance trade routes, a kind of ancient highway system where goods and ideas moved from hand to hand across the continent. It's unlikely that a trader from a Puebloan village like Chaco Canyon made the entire, treacherous journey to Oklahoma themselves. Instead, goods likely moved in a chain. Puebloan traders might have taken their wares to the eastern edges of their territory. There they could have traded with intermediaries, perhaps groups living in what is now the Texas Panhandle, who then carried them further east, eventually reaching the villages of Oklahoma. In exchange for their beautiful pottery, turquoise, and obsidian, the plains villagers likely offered something of immense value in return: bison products. Dried bison meat, tallow, and most importantly, bison robes were highly prized commodities in the Southwest, where the climate was colder and such warm resources were scarce. But there is a more intriguing and darker possibility. Some archaeologists point to the timing. This period of trade coincides with what is known as the Great Drought, a prolonged period of arid conditions that gripped the Southwest in the late 13th century. This drought is famously linked to the complete collapse and abandonment of the entire Puebloan civilization in the Four Corners region. Could the appearance of their artifacts in Oklahoma be more than just trade? Could it be evidence of migration? As their world dried up and their society crumbled, groups of Puebloans may have fled eastward, bringing their precious belongings with them. They may have sought refuge among the plains villagers, integrating their culture and their crafts into a new home far from the deserts they left behind. Then there are the objects themselves. A piece of pottery is not just a container, it's a piece of culture, a carrier of ideas. The discovery of Puebloan pottery in Oklahoma isn't just evidence of trade in goods, but trade in thought. Did the designs on the pots, the intricate geometric patterns and spiritual symbols influenced the art of the plains people? Did the techniques for working turquoise get passed along? The artifacts suggest a meeting of worlds, a cultural exchange that would have enriched both societies in ways we can only begin to imagine. The lost trade of the Panhandle paints a picture of an ancient America that was far more interconnected than we often assume. It challenges the idea of isolated, independent cultures and replaces it with a vision of a continent linked by invisible roads, where a pot made in a New Mexico cliff house could end its days on the Oklahoma plains, a silent witness to a journey we are only now beginning to understand. Deep within the ancient burial mounds of the Ouachita Mountains, in sites belonging to the Fourche Malay culture, archaeologists have uncovered some of the most delicate and mysterious artifacts ever found in Oklahoma. These are not tools or weapons, but objects of stunning beauty and profound symbolism. The sun circles. Fashioned from sheets of flawless, shimmering mica or carved from soft red sandstone, these discs are etched with perfect circles, radiating lines and intricate swirls, unmistakable representations of the sun. But their mystery deepens not from how they were made, but from how they were used. These sacred solar symbols were not displayed to the living. They were carefully, deliberately placed in the graves of powerful leaders, buried in the darkness of the earth. Why would a culture create a symbol of light, life, and warmth, only to consign it to the eternal dark? The Fourche Malay people, who inhabited southeastern Oklahoma from roughly 100 BC to 800 AD, were a mound-building culture, predecessors to the mighty Caddo. They lived in villages along the rich river valleys, and they honored their dead by burying them in sacred earthworks, often accompanied by objects that held great importance. Among these grave goods, the sun circles stand out. They show no signs of wear. They weren't jewelry sewn onto clothing or used as everyday ritual objects. They were crafted with incredible precision, often from fragile, imported materials like mica, which had to be carefully traded for from sources hundreds of miles away in the Appalachian Mountains. Their value was clearly immense, both materially and spiritually. The most widely accepted theory is that these discs were powerful emblems of leadership and spiritual authority. A chief or a high priest may have been buried with a sun circle to signify their connection to the most powerful force in the sky, the sun itself. In life, they may have been seen as a representative of the sun on Earth, responsible for ensuring the growth of crops, the change of seasons, and the well-being of their people. Burying the disc with them was a way to complete this symbolic journey. It wasn't being hidden away, it was being returned. It was a final act to ensure the leader's spirit could carry that solar power with them into the afterlife, or to appease the sun's spirit so it would continue to shine upon the people left behind. Another theory suggests the discs were not just symbols, but practical ritual objects. The finely carved lines and circles could have been used for astronomical tracking. Held up to the sky at certain times of the year, they might have helped priests predict solstices and equinoxes, marking the crucial dates for planting and harvest. Burying such a powerful calendrical tool with its keeper would have been a way to retire its power, to prevent it from being misused by others, or to allow the priest to continue his sacred work in the next world. There is also a more esoteric interpretation. In many indigenous cosmologies, the journey to the afterlife is conceived as a journey through darkness to a new world of light. The sun's circle, placed on the chest of the deceased or beside them in the grave, might have served as a map, a talisman, or a source of light to guide the spirit through the treacherous shadow lands to the bright realm of the ancestors. It was a portable piece of the sun, a literal beacon in the dark to ensure a safe passage. The sun circles of Fourche Malay are a beautiful contradiction, symbols of the ultimate source of life, found only in the silent homes of the dead. They speak to a culture that saw no true end in death, but a transition. By burying the sun with their chiefs, they were making a profound statement about the cyclical nature of existence, that just as the sun sets each evening, it is reborn each morning. The leader's burial was not an end, but a promise of renewal, sealed in stone and mica, and waiting in the earth for 1,000 years to tell its story. Beneath the shimmering surface of Oklahoma's Illinois River, hidden from the view of kayakers and fishermen, lies a geological puzzle that blurs the line between the work of nature and the hand of man. In the riverbed, scattered along a particular stretch, are a series of perfect, cylindrical holes carved directly into the solid sandstone. These are the so-called boiling pots, and their formation is a subject of quiet debate. Some see them as a fascinating natural phenomenon, a quirk of geology. But others look at their precise form and strategic placement and wonder if they are something far more intentional, the remnants of an ancient, sophisticated technology designed to feed an entire culture. The boiling pots are, at their simplest, potholes. They are circular depressions, some several feet wide and deep, with remarkably smooth and vertical walls. Geologists have a standard explanation for such features. They are formed over centuries by the relentless force of water. The theory goes that a harder piece of rock, like a piece of quartz or chert, becomes trapped in a small natural depression in the riverbed. The current swirls this rock around and around, grinding it against the sandstone like a natural drill bit, slowly and patiently excavating a near-perfect cylinder. Given enough time, the process can create these stunning, pot-like formations. It's a compelling and entirely plausible natural explanation. But the mystery arises when you look at their context. These potholes are not isolated. They appear in groups, and they are often arranged in lines or patterns that seem to span the river in a way that feels deliberate. This has led to an alternative theory, that these are not natural formations at all, but the foundations of ancient fish weirs or traps, engineered by the Native American people who lived along these banks for thousands of years. The concept is ingenious. Imagine a wooden grate or a woven basket set into one of these perfectly sized holes. The force of the current would funnel fish directly into this trap. A series of such traps, arranged strategically across the river, could have created a highly efficient and passive fishing system. The people could tend to these traps regularly, harvesting a steady supply of fish with minimal effort. The boiling action of the water swirling within them would keep the catch fresh and oxygenated until it was collected. It would represent a profound understanding of hydrology and resource management. So, which is it? The work of countless years of flowing water, or the clever adaptation of a natural feature into a tool? The answer may lie in the middle. It is highly likely that the initial potholes were formed by natural processes, but the ancient inhabitants of the region, keen observers of their world, would have noticed these unique formations. They might have recognized their potential and then, using stone tools, carefully widened and deepened them, perfecting nature's rough draft into a more effective and uniform tool. They saw a useful accident and improved upon it. The boiling pots remain an enigma because they leave no physical evidence beyond the holes themselves. The wooden gratchers and baskets have long since rotted away in the river current, leaving behind only the stone sockets that held them. They are ghost structures, their true purpose faded away with the people who might have used them. They challenge us to look at the natural world not just as a resource, but as a partner. Were the boiling pots a natural wonder, or were they an ancient engine of survival, a silent testament to a forgotten ingenuity that turned the river's own energy into a sustainable source of life? The river keeps its secret, the water forever swirling in its deep, dark pots. In the fertile valleys of central Oklahoma, a dramatic and quiet revolution unfolded, one that reshaped the entire identity of a people. For centuries, the ancestors of the Ouachita people lived a life that would have been familiar to the Spiros or the Caddo. They built permanent villages of sturdy, dome-shaped grass houses surrounding large earthen mounds. They were skilled farmers, tending vast fields of corn, beans, and squash. They were a settled, mound-building society, deeply connected to a specific place. Then, around the time of European contact, something changed. In a historical pivot, they deliberately walked away from their permanent towns, their mounds, and their sedentary life. They took their distinctive grass houses with them, but they put them on a new foundation, the back of a horse. This is the mystery of the Ouachitas' great transition, why a thriving culture would choose to abandon its roots for a life of movement on the open plains. The scale of this shift cannot be overstated. It was a complete reinvention of their economy, their social structure, and their very worldview. To understand the why, we must look at the arrival of two transformative forces on the southern plains, the horse and the European market. In the 1600s, horses, originally brought to the Americas by the Spanish, spread north from Spanish settlements in the southwest. Their impact was revolutionary. For the first time, people had the mobility to efficiently hunt the massive herds of bison that roamed the grasslands. The Ouachita, ever the pragmatists, saw an opportunity. At the same time, French and Spanish traders from the east and south were arriving, and they had an insatiable appetite for two things: bison robes and pemmican, dried, powdered bison meat mixed with berries that could last for years. This demand created a powerful new economic engine. The Ouachita realized that the riches of the plains could now be directly converted into European trade goods, metal pots, knives, guns, and beads, which offered a new level of material wealth and efficiency. The old life of farming was difficult and risky, subject to drought and failure. The new life of nomadic bison hunting, supercharged by the horse, offered incredible economic potential. So they made a calculated choice. They chose the ledger book over the planting stick. They dismantled their permanent villages, not out of desperation, but out of ambition. They became master equestrians and bison hunters, using their iconic grass houses as mobile homes that could be packed up and moved to follow the herds. They became the vital middlemen of the plains, trading the products of the hunt to Europeans for goods they would then trade further with other tribes. But this revolution may have had a darker catalyst. The same European contact that brought horses and trade also brought diseases like smallpox and measles, which devastated sedentary village populations. The crowded conditions of a permanent town were a death sentence when plague struck. The nomadic life, with its smaller, more scattered bands, offered a form of biological defense. Leaving the old villages behind may have been a strategy for survival in a new and dangerous world. The Ouachita didn't disappear, they adapted brilliantly. Their story is not one of collapse, but of strategic evolution. They saw the currents of change swirling around them, the horse, the new market, the new dangers, and they made a conscious decision to ride that wave rather than be drowned by it. They traded the stability of the earth for the freedom of the grass, becoming lords of the plains and architects of their own destiny. The mystery of their revolution isn't about why they fell, but about how they had the foresight to transform, leaving their mounds as silent memorials to a life they willingly and successfully left behind.